I'm Jessica Anne Pressler, and you've tuned into Your Traitor Within, a podcast that exposes the brutal truths of healing, self discovery, and breaking free from relentless patterns of self sabotage. Today's guest on Your Traitor Within is Dr. John A. King. He is an Australian born Indigenous author, speaker, and survivor advocate based in Texas. He founded the Give Them a Voice Foundation to champion male survivors of childhood sexual abuse and to combat human trafficking. John translates hard won recovery into practical brotherhood driven frameworks that help men rebuild discipline, purpose, and relationships. His work has been featured in award winning documentaries, Stopping Traffic and Light in Darkness, and across podcasts and stages serving law enforcement, veterans, and community leaders. He's currently publishing a memoir and several fictional books based on his life and anti trafficking work. He's also actively building the Phoenix Collective, a performance mindset platform for people who have experienced trauma and those who support them. I want to thank you ahead of time for your vulnerability as you share your Trader Within story with us. And I want to learn a lot more about what you do and your life journey. I am honored to welcome Dr. King. Welcome.
Hey, g'day, Jessica. Nice to be here.
I love having you on. I also love having men on because I think that the more that men come on and speak about their story, the more it gives permission for others to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, as I said, ahead for your vulnerability. You're doing such great work. And one of the things I also notice is that not only are you helping the people who have had abuse in their youth, but you're helping the people that help them too.
Yeah, yeah, I am. I, I would not be here with today without my wife. My memoir that is being shopped at the moment by my agent is, at the end of every chapter where I talk about what I was dealing with, she talks about how he faced it together.
Oh,
And, Melissa was the voice at the phone on a couple of very strategic occasions where I was battling the bottle and a barrel of a gun. And she has been there. When someone else saw my life as trash, she saw the potential for treasure, and so the power of partnership. My focus is men by design because there's very few advocates for men,
mhm.
particularly in the trafficking space. Yet 45% of all people who have been abused or trafficked are male, and yet no one talks about it. If you get into some of the Pakistan areas and those areas, it's about 85% of all victims are male.
Wow.
So we don't really talk about that. But the other thing we don't talk about is women as perpetrators. Yet about 40 to 45% of perpetrators in trafficking are female. So there's this gender bias as opposed to a human rights issue. And I'm really focused on wanting to help couples deal with their stuff and help guys be able to champion their voice.
I love everything you just said. I don't even know where to start, but um, I will start with the question I asked,
Yes,
or the comment about how you also help the people helping the people who are
sure.
victims. Because, I've been a psychotherapist for almost 40 years. And one of the things that's so important to do when you're helping somebody is that you don't help if ideally, if you're able to help the people around them, help them because you can work with them one on one and then send them back in the same situation or
Yeah,
work one on one and send them back. And the loved one doesn't know what to do. They're at a loss. And
yeah.
so I love that you do that. I love that your wife is who she is for you and for
So
herself.
do I.
See, and when we do have advocates and support, it's really shown to absolutely help in our survive. How we heal and how we survive.
But I think it's essential. I think it's one of those areas that um, is not talked about. And I think a lot of the veteran communities I work in and the law enforcement, there's very much a stoic, I've got to get this through. And there's a need to be really hard. Hard men suppress things. And I think that's part of it. And men stay silent because they'd rather be thought of as hard than hurt. And
Mhm.
I think that is part of that. And even translating that and bringing that back into home, they'd rather be hard than hurt. and silence feels safer than honesty. And so there's a lot of things at play there, and we're actively trying to model that that's not the best way to do it because everyone knows it's not the best way to do it.
Well, society has to help with that and not bring shame if some gentleman wants to come and speak about what's happened to them.
Yeah, and I'm really appreciative of the fact that you use terms like that. I was on a podcast just recently, and there was a lady that I was speaking with, and she had a very horrendous situation she went through, and she said, "Well, I didn't come through as a woman because I was embarrassed, I was ashamed, I didn't feel empowered, I felt there was a lot of social pressures." Then she stopped and said, "But I don't understand why men wouldn't come forward." It's like, well, I, it literally like a glitch in the matrix. It says, well, how about for everything you just said?
Mhm.
Those being male doesn't exclude you from those range of emotions or difficulties. What's what excludes a lot of men is because over the top of that is a lack of permission to talk about it. And
Mhm.
there's not a seat at this particular table to have a conversation. And I think that's changing. It wasn't the case when I started 20 years ago,
Mhm.
but it's starting to change now. The conversations are becoming a little more open, which
Mhm.
is wonderful to see.
Yeah, what you said makes perfect sense. Women have been talking to other women for a long time.
Yeah,
Men need to have the permission to do so as well, and don't have to be. One of the gentlemen that came on to my podcast came on and said his traitor was having to be macho, and that I think it started in his childhood having to have his father's approval, and then made choices in his younger years because I think he realized what he was doing in his late 20s, which to me is still young,
yeah,
and made changes and realized that he was much more compassionate, charitable soul than this macho guy that he was trying to present, and not being his authentic self. So permission to be human, really, permission to express what's happening, and not have to have this shell.
yeah. And I think, women communicate face to face, men communicate shoulder to shoulder. So even in a therapy environment, a man sitting across from another man is like they're better off go bowling and have a beer and have a chat. But and a man sitting across from a woman who engages face to face, and men don't do that. That we'd rather be in a deer stand, we'd rather be fishing, we'd rather be sitting next to it, watching sports. There's a camaraderie as men are engaged in an activity together that gives them away. And that's part of why I believe we're seeing the success we're seeing with some guys is because we structure things that way that we're engaged in things together. Even our conversations that are face to face, there's a series of dialogues that you can have and words you can use that put it
Mhm.
shoulder to shoulder, which is very important, I think, to get that sense of horizontal communication.
I agree. Which, not to bring it to fast forward to like the whole idea about texting and emailing, and no one's talking, and no one's face to face anymore, and so that also creates distance
Yes, it does very much.
for
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
So, I know you're from Australia, right?
Yes, I am.
So there's also different cultures in in different countries
Yeah,
about how men are allowed to come forward or even admit that they may see it as weakness. I mean, even so, it's not obviously
yeah,
the victim, and that's
yeah.
very clear. But to admit it publicly that they were abused by either another man or a woman.
Yeah, there are culturally, Australia does a couple of things well. The sense of mateship and the bond between men is very strong. It was at least in my generation. I think it's changed. Um, I was just back there 2 years ago. I discovered my family for the first time, so I'm Brani. I'm an Australian Indigenous man. And the Australian government had a policy to breed the black out. So by the time you got to the third generation, because melanin is recessive in Aboriginals, they were blonde haired and brown eyes like I were. And so, whereas in Africans, it's a dominant gene. And I had it very, it was, I went back there and I spent 18 months living in the bush with my tribe. And it was really incredible because over there, there's women's business and there's men's business. So
Mhm.
tribally, that's how we conduct our law and our stories. And having that space, just as men and just as women, to have conversations around things that are secret. secret men's business and secret women's business. And
Mhm.
we're raised in our culture to understand that there are some things that are best kept to women and there are some things that are best kept to men.
Mhm.
And what that does is create an environment. And for the men, it's always hunting or it's always sitting around a fire. It creates an environment where you can sit with grief and you can sit with hardship and you're sitting in a space and you leave it there. And the next time you come back, a fire in a different location, you literally pick it up again. And
Oh.
so there's these ongoing conversations. Grief is not something we're scared of. Grief
Mhm.
is something that we understand. So since colonization, you seven generations, 250 years of continual impacting generational trauma.
Yes.
So as a people group, the ability to be able to process these things has been
Mhm.
essential to our survival. So it was
Mhm.
really fascinating, Jessica. It was
Mhm.
really, the whole experience was fascinating.
I'm fascinated listening to it. And I think you know that I'm also a hospice social worker. So
Yeah.
the idea of grief is something I bring to every discussion I have, just especially when people have trauma that you must, go through that process in order to
Yes.
heal.
Yeah, you do. And so you look at the grief of being separated from your mother at birth,
Yes.
to placed in a European home because they wanted to eradicate language and law. You look at the grief of your family being removed from their land for money. You look at the grief of, just being killed because of the color of your skin. That's the only reason why. So you've got all these things that stack, and then you've got the grief of alcoholism, drug abuse, violence at home,
Mhm.
sexual abuse, trafficking. Our young people are 98% of everybody in a juvenile detention center in the Northern Territory is Mbrani, Aboriginal.
Wow.
85% is Aboriginal in adult detention. So those statistics, and a population that's only 3% of the overall Australian population. So there's a massive issue. So you've got these multiple layering. So grief is something and trauma is something you're living in all the time. And so the ability to be able to have places where you can constantly be just allowing this thing to move aside for greater things like our law and stories. And I think you can displace grief with other things in a very positive way. If
Mhm.
you dwell in grief, it becomes a very negative thing. But if you
Mhm.
can displace it with a sense of life, it
Yes.
becomes a really interesting dynamic that happens.
Mhm. And back to the support. If you talk about sitting around a fire and discussing grief, then you're
You're
again,
not alone.
you're,
Yeah,
you're
you're not
not.
alone. You sit there with each other. You sit there with an acknowledgement of the Creator. You sit there with the acknowledgement of your ancestors. And so
Mhm.
our ancestors aren't forgotten. I think in Western society, well, I certainly know I had the privilege and the disprivilege of growing up in a European society, and I had it was one of those bittersweet things. I'm very grateful for my education and my opportunity, very grieved in some ways about missing out what I missed out in language and culture. So you're sitting with these things, and there's there's an understanding that time is cyclical. It's not linear, and the ability to be able to understand and learn from generations. And I think part of our Western culture has forgotten that ability, that
Mhm.
we are not just in this moment in time. There's a whole history of who we are from the Creator coming forward to where we are now, and all of that is available for us to learn from, and it's lived within our DNA. I think there's
Mhm.
a bunch of stuff in there that I'm just starting to really come to terms with personally.
Yeah. So a little bit about your story. So you were indigenous and you were taken from from your family? What happened?
Yeah, so we don't actually know. That often the story in Australia is that Brownie or Aboriginal women would give birth, and they would be. My brother's story is that he was taken, put into one of those little incubates, wheeled into the foyer of this hospital, and a European family picked him up and took him.
Wow.
And so as you get to the third generation, you are fairer in skin.
Hmm.
Can't get rid of the big black fella nose, but still you're fairer in skin. And so they would often be placed with European families. In my situation, my birthing records are all messed up. And the lady who raised me, we believe, had postpartum. and they gave her an Aboriginal child, myself, to help cope with that, which was a practice back then in the 60s. So all my birthdays are wrong, or all those early nursing records are all wrong, names are wrong, all of that's been scrubbed out. Um, Falsified birth certificates. So what I've got is oral history down through some other family members, and so that's how I was able to reconnect with them.
And so you went back when? When did you go and spend those 8 months?
Oh, my glorious wife, Melissa.
Yeah.
So she's Cherokee. So red fella marries a black fella in Dallas, Texas.
Mhm.
So we went and reconnected with her people back in South Carolina, North Carolina area. And we
Mhm.
were over there, and she said, uh, Jackie, you're coming up to 60, and you've always had this question about your people.
Mhm.
So I'm 60, 62, coming up to 63 now. She said, you need to solve it. You need to answer it once and for all, let it go. Because for the 10 years that I've known you, this has been a big part. And I didn't realize what a part of my identity it was in terms of the unknown. I
Mhm.
didn't, but on it, obviously I talked about it a lot.
Mhm.
And so yeah, she booked a couple of tickets and we
Mhm.
went walkabout.
And how did it feel?
It was the most incredible thing. I am too white to be black in America and too black to be white in Australia.
Interesting.
And you get off the plane and everybody looks at you different because they immediately recognize you as Aboriginal. That's
Yeah.
everybody across the board. I walk into an art gallery. Well, this was on the first day we're there. Walk into an art gallery and there's some Mbrani or Aboriginal women sitting on the floor teaching his class to kids. And, they say she looked up at me, this lady, and she said, hey, cuz, where's your mob? Which is, an Mbrani way of asking who are your family and where you're from. And I
Oh.
said, sister, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
She goes, oh, they'll find you, cuz. Don't worry about it. It'll be good.
Oh.
And it was literally like that. We spent 5 weeks there the first time,
Mm-hmm.
being handed from family to family. Because, and as you're aware, there's a series of thoughts and concepts amongst Indigenous people that facial features will dictate and reveal uh, genetic family trees and location. So just by looking at people's faces, they can identify what family they're probably most likely to be from and what location they're most likely to be from.
Mm-hmm.
And because our DNA is so random, a lot of it comes down through Asia. Then we get there, and it's very mixed because of this incredible, onslaught of that's happened for the last seven generations. And so literally they passed me from one place to another place to another place until
Mm-hmm.
I collided with my brother and his wife. And so I walked into a tent and he looked at me and he said, I've been looking for you all my life, brother.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was. It was
Wow.
a thing. Yeah. Yeah, it's a thing. Still is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what you must have felt at that moment.
Our home.
Yeah.
So there's a concept amongst Mbrani about manu. There are only two places that a person can exist. You
Mhm.
either exist on country or you're not on country. You're not anywhere else, you're just not on country. This country is the only place you exist. It's made me really think. It made me really think. So as a precursor to this, I'm a Christian man. And the concept of God having a tribe and a people in a particular location is very known within, our theology. So God's indigenous, and the concept that the Creator himself is indigenous and has a people and has a land and a place, I think it's been there from Genesis all the way through. Yet we seem to ignore it. We seem to think that indigenation comes down to the color of a particular set of skin. It's not. We all belong from somewhere. We have our roots and our places. I've got a friend of mine. He's an Irish American, and he went to Dublin for the very first time, stepped on Heather, and burst into tears.
Yeah.
I've got similar stories about people going back to Korea. Uh,
Mhm.
I asked a guy once, I said, where's your people from? He goes, Atlanta. He says, no, come on, mate. He goes, Nigeria. I said, what was it like there? He goes, I felt like I was home. There's something about the connection between country. I'm sure it's tied into frequency and our DNA.
Mhm.
And there's, and that's a, that's part of what our Brani law teaches us about is being connected to the earth in such a way that it
Mhm.
brings a sense of wholeness to us. Um, and so yeah, it was pretty amazing to get your feet on country for the first time and realize that the one thing you're missing uh, is now here. You go from orphan to tribe, and you have
Mhm.
a sense of a place you now belong in the world,
Yeah.
which is really cool and really weird at the same time. Yeah.
Mhm. I'm so happy for you, by the way, that
Thank you.
that you
I
feel.
am too.
First Melissa, and
Yeah.
then
I look, man, I'm on a roll, man. It keeps on going,
yeah. Okay, so let me hear your story on how your journey in regard to the abuse and trafficking, and what brought you then to take your trauma and help other people.
So my first, the first memory I have is was being engaged in a sexual act when I was about 4,
Um,
and there was a series of them that happened, and I look back in that, and we'd probably call that trafficking now. Um, and so my childhood was filled with these things. Apparently I was very good at providing oral sex to the woman who raised me, her friends, and there was movies made, and there's a whole series of things that were done then. So I had recall of that when I was 45. Uh, you know, I, up to that stage, it were like little 8 millimeter films, like little frames, and there were these separate things that happened, and I couldn't really reconcile them, but that was just my childhood, and I had nothing to compare them to when I was going through it. And even as an adult looking back, it was like, no, I don't know if that happened, man. Like because I know I'm smart enough to know memory plays things up and stuff like that. But on one particular morning, I had recall of all that happened. There was an event that triggered it, and I had recall of what happened, and it all played together. And that was the first time I could grasp a concept, and the only time I ever called myself a victim of sexual abuse. And I just had this, and it played for about 7 years. Sometimes it still gives me, it's a struggle, but played over and over again for about 7 years. And so I went through this period of time of having to unpack all of that during nightmares and daymares and everything else. And so yeah, yeah. So that's how, so that precipitated into a journey of trying to solve it.
mhm.
And because there was no resources for men, there still are very little. But there was no resources or no support groups for men. There was no books for men. So I went back to the Napoleonic Wars and had a look at, heart tremor or soldier's tremor, I think it was, and then into the Civil War, up into World War II, and what became known as post-traumatic stress disorder with the Gulf War. And so that was my reading basis for it. And so I took those, I read about 200 books, and I thought, okay, I identified 20% of things that I needed to address in myself to bring about 80% of change, the Pareto principle. And that was really the start of the journey of coming back into recovery. And going forward into what we're now doing with the Phoenix Collective, it's that same principle. What are those 20% of things that can bring 80% of your change and get you down the road?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so that's what we try and do.
So if someone comes to you, what happens? How does it all happen?
So recovery is very expensive. When I was working in the trafficking stuff, we worked at the top, well, the group I was working with worked at the tail end of the Epstein case and the guy who took over from me from Niger. And we're involved in actively protecting about a dozen people that were in a secular or community-based protection program. And everyone gets enamored and likes the sexy side, for want of a better term, of trafficking, the rescue. But no one focuses on the recovery. And I looked at my own life and realized it takes about 10 years and about $10,000 a year to recover. But no one was doing anything with that. So I looked at my own journey, Melissa and I did a couple of years ago, and said, look, it's taken me about 15 years and about $300,000, and I've been privileged to be in a position to be able to spend that money to work from home to get whole. Why don't I take that information, the information I put in my memoir, and why don't we provide it for people? And so we did. So it's about a 6 month course that probably should take people about 2 or 3 years. and it's 5 minutes of video and then 10 to 15 minutes of exercise every day for 6 days a week on, week off for a period. And we've found that's the best way, that small incremental change is the most lasting. And
Mhm.
so we've designed this program to give people a continuous series of wins as they implement it. And we've
Mm.
found that that is what actually works. It's a 1% principle.
Mhm.
So yeah, and it's working well. We're seeing some wonderful changes in people's hearts and lives,
Mhm.
and and which is always proof in the pudding.
Of course.
Yeah.
And how would someone know about you? And besides listening to this podcast, but how?
Listening to your podcast, probably.
Yeah.
Well, drjohnaking.com is my website, or they can find me on social at Dr. John A. King.
Mhm.
So we've got a series of things we're telling people about it. It's very affordable and very accessible.
Mhm.
Um, you know, because people can't afford $300,000 and to take 15 years. Like they
Right.
can't. So it's like $97 for life because I hate subscriptions. Everything's a bloody subscription. You don't own anything anymore. It wears me out. So for the price of lunch, they can get on there for 27 bucks. And if they put podcast in from your podcast, they put podcast in there, they'll get it'll, and we offer free seminars once every 6 or 8 weeks. People can come and just benefit from the teaching that we do. So it really is, what it is, Jessica, is like John 1.0 is very analytical, very anally retentive, goal-driven type 5-year
Mhm.
plan guy. John 2.0, after I'd recall, was like full left brain, wanted to smoke cigars and write poetry. And they really didn't get on. And so this guy, 2.0, really didn't like 1.0. So what the hell? This guy's a pain in the ass. And this guy was like, this guy's just a fruitcake. He wants to sit around and write poetry and smoke cigars. So John 3.0 was over here going, oh man, I'm done with these two. And so I've put all that information together to bookend that particular phase of my life.
Mhm.
And we've taken a big jump into the next stage of what I want to do for the next 20 years or so. And so for me, I feel like I'm wrapping up a whole space. And it's really a great feeling, really scary at the same time, but really a sense of fulfillment. It's like I feel after 16 years, and I'd love your audience to know this, that there is no such thing as an overnight, like therapy and trauma is something you manage for the rest of your life. There's no fairy godmother involved. There's no magic wand. There's no magic clue, and no one knows. If anyone tells you buy this book, just don't burn it, um, because it's this ongoing getting tools from your toolbox to manage your life. And what I feel like I've done is I've finished this phase of my life. Well, I've finished in the sense of I can encapsulate it, and I've got it in such a form now. I can go, okay, try this because I really think this will help you.
Mhm.
And then they've got something to work through.
Mhm. So let's talk a little bit about the trader.
Yeah.
Do you think John 1.0 and 1 and 2.0 is part of your trader, or do you think that was formed, or is it just different stages that you're growing?
No, John, it was daffodils for me. Like when I was a kid, I'd walk to school. When things were really tough, I'd walk to school, and the lady next door, two doors down, Mrs. McGregor, had these beautiful like purple plum trees, and underneath them she grew daffodils.
Mm.
And I counted my childhood by daffodils. Like if I saw the daffodils come up in springtime, then it
Mhm.
was like, okay, I've made it one more year.
Wow.
And this particular spring morning, about 18 years ago, or 16, however many long ago, when I was 45, it was I stepped out of my riding shed and the daffodils were coming up, and I looked down at them and said, oh wow, they're beautiful. And that's when it just all came back. And
Mhm.
so I went from there. I was traveling the world at that stage, about 150, 200,000 air miles a year, speaking all over the world, from that to a chronic stutter. My marriage imploded, estranged from my children. And, I was living in a one-bedroom flat, cinder block building. I was actively encouraged to kill myself. I was told that I'd never recover and never make it.
Actively encouraged. Wait, we can't pass that. Actively encouraged by yourself, actively encourage people around you. What do you?
By the woman I was married to at the time.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So her words on multiple occasions were, I don't believe God would have me married to someone as bad as you are. You'll never recover. why don't you do us a favor?
I'm
And so,
so
that was, I didn't know what I didn't know what a narcissist was until probably half a dozen years ago. But I'm pretty sure
yes.
there's a whole bunch of traits tied up in that one. And so um, I got to a point of saying, okay, listen, if you actually believe that this is not God's best for you, then I'm out. I don't know what, I don't know. When you look at someone and say, I'll take personal responsibility for 98% of the problems in my marriage, I just need you to take 2% responsibility that maybe there's things that you could do better. And their response is, I've never done anything wrong.
Right. So,
You can't do anything with that. It's like,
yeah.
well, I'm fucked. I'm done. This ain't going to work.
Mhm.
I was 45. I wasn't finished having sex.
Mhm.
I wasn't going to sign off on that it'd been a couple of years since then. It's like, you know, and it was like, well, you're a Christian man. You'll never leave. I said, yeah, I'm a man who's a Christian. I'm not done shagging. Like I like sex.
Mhm.
And I want intimacy. I want companionship. I want the full measure of,
Well, hopefully, and know
life.
that you deserve kindness and compassion.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you. I didn't even think of that at the time. Like I was not kind to myself.
Mhm.
Kindness is something Melissa taught me about.
Mhm.
I didn't even know kindness existed. I've never had kindness. The first time in my life I was ever happy was when I met Melissa. It was the
Mhm.
first day, and it was this weird, uncomfortable feeling,
Mhm.
and it was like horrible. Peace when you've never known it is the scariest thing.
Mhm.
It's like I don't like, and your brain doesn't like it, so it immediately wants to start creating the next drama.
Mhm.
And so it was like, I don't know, man, this whole peace and kind shit. I don't know this. I want to rail against something. So,
Mhm.
so it's taken me a lot of years just to calm the fuck down.
What would Melissa do when you try to, shake it up, when you had trouble tolerating it?
She would walk towards me.
Mhm.
And that was the thing. Melissa saw me. She saw me trying, and
Mhm.
she would walk towards me, and she'd hold my hand, and it took us a long time to come to a place. We worked very effectively on communication.
Mhm.
We solved a lot of situations loudly,
Mhm.
and she can throw some shit around the house. Like if she gets pissed off, like she's a Southern girl, she'll knife you if she has to. And so she but she's always been committed to just loving me and or just seeing me. I think seeing is the term.
Well, seeing you and loving you for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Well, she never knew John 1.0. So she never knew the guy traveling the world making millions of dollars, hyper successful, hyper driven. She
Mhm.
saw what someone else saw as trash and she saw it as treasure. So
Mhm.
she's only ever known John 2.0, which is she's getting really excited about who John 3.0 because, this is really fun.
Mhm.
So, you know, the best days of your life, well, she's never known that. I've never experienced it. I'm coming into that phase now. It's just, but yeah, she'd walk towards me. And
Mhm.
the other thing she learnt, and we've talked about this, and at the end of every chapter of my book, she actually writes about what it
Mhm.
was like to go through that together, was that she realized that it was a little bit like I was drowning in China and I didn't speak Chinese and I was yelling to try and get people's attention, and that's what it feels like when you're in the middle of one of these episodes. That volume has got very little to do with the people present and all to do with the people that are present. And
Mhm.
Melissa had the capacity to be able to
Right.
not 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 see those.
That's very important. So when I've done couple work, that's one of the things I teach couples, not when you're working with the narcissist part of a couple, but two people that are capable.
Yeah,
Um, and that is when people come together, let's say they have a fight. The fight is usually, and I'm throwing out numbers, it's not these numbers, usually 10% about what they're fighting about, and everything
yeah,
else is their previous traumas and their
yeah,
triggers. And the most important thing I try to do is to have each other learn about each other's wounds and to understand that when that's what's happening, that they're being triggered, and not to trigger each other, so that if the couple can come with compassion toward each other and want and if it works, if the couple then doesn't get triggered themselves because they realize it's not personal, it's their
Yeah.
other person's dealing with their own stuff that they came with,
Yeah.
then you can lead with compassion and you can heal each other. It really does work.
Yeah, it really does. Melissa had a rough childhood, a lot of eating disorder stuff, and so we've done lots of work on both sides of the fence.
Hmm.
And I think to your point, it was her ability to be able to separate the man from the message. It's
Yeah.
like John is John, and I love John,
Hmm.
and John is having a really difficult time, but
Hmm.
John's not having a difficult time with me.
Right.
And so, she's one of my heroes. It's her ability to be able to do that. I don't know if I'm that kind. Like, she's uber kind. She's like the nicest human being you'll ever meet. Me, yeah, not so much. But her, and I'm being blessed. I'm very, very grateful for the gift she is. Yeah, I
Mhm.
really, yeah.
So, as a child, how did you cope with the abuse, with the trauma, and other trauma, all of it? How did you, as a child, get through your day with the daffodils, but get through your day?
Oh,
And a teen, you're
yeah. I- um, I'd like to answer that, Jessica, but I'm not sure that I can.
okay.
Because I don't remember.
Hmm.
I genuinely don't have a lot of memories. The memories that I have are very compartmentalized,
Hmm.
and I don't. I understand cognitively that the way my brain works is it very quickly is done with something,
Hmm.
and is not a good thing. And that's part of a challenge at sometimes.
Hmm.
But in terms of my childhood, I was a very lonely child. I read a lot of books,
Hmm.
um, loved to read. I spent a lot of time on my own. I played a lot of sports.
Hmm.
But even when I was playing sports or at college or at school, I was always sad. And everyone told me I had a depression issue, or I was a melancholic personality. But I look back at, and the other thing too is, I found this later in life, is I'm autistic. So as you know, autistic kids are probably 4 or 5 times more likely to be abused. So I developed this series of masking behavior. I was a
Hmm.
very good liar. Authenticity is something I've come to greatly value in my as an adult. It was
Hmm.
something because I lied to survive. I knew I was going to get abused, and I would
Hmm.
try and I developed the skill to be able to emotionally tell who was going to hurt me the least. So I enamored myself to that person. So I chose them to hurt me because they were going to be the kindest, predator in the room. And so that's a skill that translates into business and a range of other things. But the
Hmm.
problem is, if you keep building on that skill, you
Hmm.
actually prevent yourself from getting whole. So there's this swirl of things that happened growing up,
Hmm.
and you know, I I'm not sure how I can answer that.
No, so it sounds to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, that's fine, that that skill was your traitor, that it worked when you had to do it, when, I mean, it was working because the traitor works. It's
Yeah,
a friend when you're younger. It
yeah,
suited a purpose. It's when you don't need to use it anymore and it
yeah.
sabotages.
That's very good. Thank you. That's very good. Yeah, that'll do. It's nice learning new things. What's been really interesting is understanding masking behavior and autism. I think the masking behavior is the thing that allowed me to survive, and also the thing, as you said, this is revelatory. The thing that um, allowed me to survive, and the thing that prevented me from growing.
Yes.
I think that's probably, and now, for, for me, it's something like a diagnosis for autism is a reason, not an excuse. It gives me a reason to understand a set of behavior as an excuse to justify a set of behavior. And so it's a recent diagnosis for me. And it was like, it just went, "Pah." it was like all these other bits that I've been striving so hard to understand or to fix is
Hmm.
like, oh, that's just me.
That's
You
right.
know, it's so so
I
I
mean,
get this, I
I
get this going.
yeah,
So
I'm just saying, I encourage people to even look at their traitor with compassion.
yeah,
That they mean well, that had a purpose. It comes, it's trying to do good, but it just isn't doing good. So it's about, you know, all
and
parts of you with to be compassionate toward or
yes,
understanding, just that you don't need to be like some of those things anymore. And someone once said to me, "How do I know that I'm in recovery?" They were talking about, we were talking about the traitor, and I always say, because I can be me. I can take those layers, peel the layers, and actually be comfortable being myself, and being in a situation where I'm not sabotaging my emotional well-being.
yeah, and that's probably just 3 or 4 months old for me.
Uh,
Is understanding. It's a very, we got this diagnosis over autism,
yeah,
and I said, Melissa, I'm autistic, and she goes, yeah, so you didn't know that? It's
I love
like,
her.
no. I said, what do you mean? I said, because you're autistic. Look at the things you do. I go, what the hell are you talking about, woman? She goes, are you kidding me now? It's so 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 she sat there making fun of me for about half an hour, going through all my autistic traits, and I'm going, bloody hell. It was just brilliant. And but this is all very, very new for me. It's like I feel a sense of freedom and release that I haven't known before. Because
Yeah.
as I said, I've got a reason, not an excuse. It's like, and also an understanding that I'm not wanting to do something, not necessarily because it's based to a traumatic event, but
Hmm.
because it's a neurological disposition,
Yes.
which means it's actually given less power to the trauma and
Yeah,
more power to John.
that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's this really weird, Jessica. It's like, this is weird, man. Like, just to be able to say no to something because you don't want to, as opposed to saying yes to something because you've got to be the trauma pretender.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay, this is a permission to, I don't know. I don't know. It's like I'm 3 months into this thing and it's like putting on a new suit or an expensive suit for the first time and realizing you really like wearing this suit.
And it's comfortable. It's not expensive and not comfortable.
It's
It's comfortable.
it's very comfortable.
Right.
Very comfortable. Yeah. Wow.
I'm like in awe. I'm so happy for you.
Well,
And
thank you.
and it really, and understanding ourselves, and being happy about it. It's like, yeah, you learn. So, and I have to say, and I want to meet Melissa one day.
We should do a podcast with Melissa.
I would love to, or the two,
That'd
yeah,
be fun.
or the
Yeah.
two, yeah, the three,
Three
because
of us would be
the
great.
three of us, because it's her love for you, the unconditional love for you that gave you a safe space to do
Yeah.
the self-discovery and to be okay with it, because she
Yeah,
created
it's a
no judgment.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a thing. And very grateful to a grandmother because apparently Melissa was an absolute terror as a child. And she spent most of her childhood standing in the corner with her nose pressed against the
Oh,
wall.
no.
And I am so grateful for grandma
Mhm.
because every now and again it flashed and it's like, what the hell is that? So,
Did you ever meet grandma, or was she
oh,
passed? Oh, you did.
once I met grandma and after we got married and we took our honeymoon out that way and she's little old Cherokee lady on a back porch in a one of those house coats that
Mm-hmm.
grandmas wear in a
Mm-hmm.
house that smelled like grandma.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked in and she looked at me and she just stared with these grandma Cherokee eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Just stared and then she looked at Melissa and goes, yeah, he's a good one. That was it. That was it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, hi grandma. Yeah.
But she felt,
So
was it like a spiritual thing that she felt? Do you think that?
I think so. I think I, it was funny. it's a story, but I'll give it to you anyway. So our honeymoon, we were driving into North and South Carolina to meet her brother, and her stepfather was very physically abusive,
Mm,
and her mother was very neglectful. Like Melissa grew up with a lot of very horrible things, and the stepfather rang Melissa and started to berate her over the phone, and I took the phone and I just said, "You'll never speak to her again like that. She's my girl. She's my wife. And in fact, until you can calm the fuck down, you're to
mm,
call me and I'll ask me for permission to speak to her because I'm sorry, you have to
mm,
come through me to get her."
mm.
And so he decided he was going to turn up with guns on our honeymoon.
Oh,
So he so I went to the police and I said, "Well, what do I need to do?" He said, "Well, I can't do the Southern accent. You'll have to put that in there."
okay.
He said, "Well, in Anderson, South Carolina, we've got the stand your ground law. Are you armed, Mr. King?" "Yes, I am." I said, "Well, you take care of you and yours,
Mm.
and we'll take care of Mr. So-and-so if he comes into town." And he did. He turned up with a back seat full of firearms,
Oh my God.
and they caught him at the outside the hotel. They'd put some and so by the time I get to grandma, I was the first person who'd ever stood up to this guy.
And
Yeah.
protected
And
Melissa.
protected Melissa
That's
and
that.
protected Mackenzie, her brother,
Right.
because he was coming down to do a range of these things. And, it's just the nature of the thing. And so
Mhm.
grandma was like, okay,
You won
okay.
her heart
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah, old school way. Yeah, you're going to look after my little girl.
Yeah.
So you're good. This one will do. So,
Wow. Wow.
yeah, grandma was a unit.
I'm glad you got to meet her.
Yeah, I am too. I wish I had more time.
Mm,
But it's okay.
mm,
Everything's okay. All
yeah.
works out.
Yeah. So is there anything you want to share with the audience, the listeners and the watchers?
Um, I know my story's terrible. I know I did, but I'm really grateful for it.
Hmm.
I wouldn't be the man I am today without it. And I
Hmm.
like me, and that's the first time in my life.
Hmm.
And I would encourage them just to get up and go again. If I can make it, they can make it. My old boxing coach taught me in the midst of the recall of all this, we'd train long and hard, and he would say, "John, just tuck your chin and throw punches. Good air in, bad air out." And
Hmm.
some days, all you can do is get up and breathe. And that's
Hmm.
enough. If you get through a day breathing, keeping your you're keeping your hands up, just metaphorically, all right, I got this, I got this. If you can just get through a day and that's all you got, then it's perfect. You've made it, and
Hmm.
I one more story if I may. I
Any?
was learning to fly,
Hmm.
and my coach, my instructor put me in a plane and he said, "I want you to fly due east, but I want you to set the compass at 89 degrees." And so we took off and we got 200 miles down from where the airport was supposed to be. He said, "Now look to where you are. See how far you are from that?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "That's just what 1 degree does." And I learnt the power of 1 degree. And when it came to stages in my recovery, and
Hmm.
I was trying and believing that I could just change everything, and I was frustrated because every day I just couldn't do this thing. And I realized that disappointment comes from unmet expectations. And sat down and gave myself a talk about how I was expecting too much from myself, which a lot of people in today's society don't like that sort of talk. And so I set myself a goal of 1%. First of all, it was 1%, 1% a day. Every day I'd change something. Well, that was 365% change. It was stupid, never going to happen. But then I thought, well, it's going to be what about 1% a week? Well, that's 50%. So like in 2 years, I'll be a totally different man. Well, that's stupid. I can't even get to the gym, on time for what. But then I realized I accepted I would change. My goal would be I would change 1% a month, and I would give myself 8 months. And here I am, 16 years in. I'm probably on to coming up to John 3.0. And I
Hmm.
think we overestimate what we can do in 12 months and underestimate what the creator can do in 10 years. And I would encourage your people to do 1% for the next 30 days. If that 1% is just staying off the sugar, if that 1% is getting to bed at the same time every night, if that 1% is eating breakfast, if that 1% is just reading a book,
Mhm.
1% is going for a walk every day, just do 1%
Mhm.
and just see what happens. And the next month, you get to do another 1%.
Mhm.
So start small, go big,
Mhm.
and you can make it.
Thank you. Great advice.